Good evening, class. This is Mrs. Albright, and today we are working on Module 5, Lesson 13. Our objective, we are continuing what we were working on in class today in Lesson 12, where we are using benchmarks such as 1 and 1.5 to compare fractions on a number line. Our first problem is to compare the fractions 7/8 and 6/4, and I'm going to use a number line to help me do this. I'm not going to worry about changing denominators or anything like that. So the first thing I want to do is look at 7/8 and ask myself, is this fraction greater than 1 or less than 1? Now, I know that 1 would be 8/8, so since it's 7/8, I know that this is less than 1 whole. So I can go to my number line. I'm going to mark this number line as 0. Here's 1, and here's 2. So 7/8 would be a little bit less than 1 whole. Now I'm going to look at my next fraction, 6/4, and ask myself, is this fraction greater than or less than 1 whole? I know that if I break this up, 4/4 would be 1 whole, and since I have 6/4, I would still have 2/4 left. So I automatically know that this fraction is greater than 1, so I can put it on my number line somewhere over here. So now to compare these fractions, I know that 6/4 is greater than 7/8, or 7/8 is less than 6/4. Now we're going to compare the fractions 5/3 and 9/5. Now both of these fractions are bigger than 1, so I'm going to use number bonds to help me. I'm going to turn this into a mixed number. I have 3/3 and 2/3 would be left over. So this fraction is 1 and 2/3. I'm going to do a number bond for this one. 9/5 would be decomposed as 5/5 and 4/5. So that would be 1 and 4/5. So really the most important parts that I'm looking at are the 2/3 and the 4/5. And if I use my number line, both of these are greater than 1, so I'm going to be using this section of the number line between 1 and 2. To find the fraction 2/3, I'm going to take my number line and break it into 3 equal parts. There's my 2/3. I know that 2/3 is 1/3 away from 2 wholes. And then I'm going to take my fraction 4/5 and put that number on the number line. So I'm going to break the same number line into 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 equal parts. And so 5/5, or 4/5, I'm sorry. Four-fifths is going to go on the number line here, and that is only 1/5 away from 2 whole. So I know that 1 and 4/5 is greater than 1 and 2/3. Or I can say that 5/3 is less than 9/5. For our next fraction, we have 7/4 and 9/5, and we need to compare these. So again, I'm going to ask myself, are these greater than or less than 1 whole? And I know that they are greater than 1 whole. 7/4 can be decomposed as 4/4 and 3/4. So I know that that is only 1/4 away from 2 whole. 9/5 is going to be 5/5 and 4/5. And I know that that is only 1/5 away from 2 whole. So without even marking these on the number line, I know, well, I can do the fourths. So this would be 1 and 3/4. If I break it up into fifths, 1, 2, 3, 4, my 1 and 4/5 is going to be here. That's only 1/5 away from 1 whole. 1 and 3/4 is 1/4 away from 1 whole. So again, I know that 9/5 is going to be greater than 7/4. Now we are going to use the benchmark fraction 1 and 1/2 and use that to help us compare fractions and to plot them on a number line. So I'm starting with the fraction 11/8, and I know that that is greater than 1. So on my number line, I'm not going to start with 0. I'm going to go ahead and start with 1 and go to 2. And I can put 1 and 1/2 right there in the middle. So 11/8, I'm going to decompose that. So it's 8/8 and 3/8. Now, 3/8, or I know that half of 8/8 would be 4/8, and 3/8 is smaller than 4/8. So I know that this fraction is going to be on the number line below 1 and 1/2. So this is going to be 1 and 3/8, and I know that that is less than 1 and 1/2. So I'm going to use what I just learned about 11/8 and use that to compare it to the fraction 5/4. So I'm going to draw my number line, and both of these fractions are greater than 1 whole. So I'm going to start my number line at 1, end it at 2, and put my 1 and 1/2 in the middle. 11/8, I just decomposed this on the previous slide, is 1 and 3/8. 5/4 is 1 and 1/4. So really the most important parts of this that I'm looking at are the 3/8 and the 1/4. So if I break this number line into fourths, 1 and 1/4 is right here. If I take the same number line and break it into eighths, 1 and 3/8 is right here. 1 and 1/4 is a fourth away from 1 and 1/2. 1 and 3/8 is only an eighth away from 1 and 1/2. So I know that this fraction, 1 and 3/8, is the greater fraction. So 11/8 is greater than 5/4. For our last problem, we're going to use the same strategy to solve this comparison. 14/10, is it greater than, less than, or equal to 7/5? So again, I know that my numerators are greater than my denominators in both of these fractions, so they are both greater than 1 whole. So I'm going to mark my number line with 1, between 1 and 2, and I'm going to put 1 and 1/2 right there in the middle. I'm going to turn these into mixed numbers, so this would be 10/10 and 4/10, and this would be 5/5 and 2/5. I know that half of 10/10 would be 5/10, so 1 and 1/2 is also equal to 1 and 5/10. So 1 and 4/10 is going to be just a little bit smaller than that. So I can just go ahead and plot that on my number line, just a little bit smaller than 1 and 5/10. Now let's take a look at the 2/5. If I take this number line and break it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2/5, can I make that an equal fraction? Can I multiply the top by 2 and bottom by 2? That is going to be equal to 4/10. So 1 and 2/5, you can see this is 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. If I put my tenths here, I would have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and 10/10. So these fractions are actually equal. 14/10 is equal to 7/5. So the main point of this whole lesson is just to really think about these fractions and what you know in terms of, are they equal to 1 or less than 1, greater than 1 1/2, less than 1 1/2, and using that to compare and order fractions. You don't always have to do all the math to figure out the common denominators to calculate them that way. You can use that logic and reasoning and those benchmarks of 1, 1 1/2, 2 in order to compare fractions. That's it for tonight. I look forward to continuing this with you more tomorrow. One last problem for your Edpuzzle. I would like you to think about the fraction 2/5 and 6/8 and ask yourself, is 2/5 greater than, less than, or equal to 6/8? And explain how you know using the benchmark fractions. Are you comparing it to 1 whole? Are you comparing it to 1 1/2? And your last problem, these fractions are going to be greater than 1 whole. 14/12, is that greater than, less than, or equal to 11/6? And again, use your benchmark fractions to explain to me how you know. Thanks. Have a great night. I will see you in class.